Hi, I'm Hilary Russo. Thanks for joining me for the Holistically Speaking podcast. I'm a certified holistic health coach and Havening Techniques practitioner, lover of great conversation, and of course, clever wordplay, holistically speaking. So welcome to an empowering place where my guests share their transformational stories of trauma to triumph through health, healing, and humor. It's the ultimate brain candy as we find out who we are, how we got that way, and what it takes to be a happy and healthy grown-up. And be kind to your mind. I'm glad you're here. 60 years. Seems like a long time, right? When you consider how old the Earth really is, 60 is just a fraction of time. It's also how many years of farmable soil are left on this planet. Yikes. I first learned about this from the award-winning documentary, The Need to Grow. What separates this film from others is the beautiful way that director Rob Herring holds space for those to share their desire for change in the film. Now, Rob isn't just some big-name director telling stories. He has one of his own. Physical health battles that had doctors seeing symptoms and diagnoses rather than ways to heal holistically. And that impacted his mental health as well. So, Rob got proactive and creative. Depression turned into determination. Cures turned into creativity. Comedy and music paved the way for Rob to share what he called new packages of information. Tools for self-care that are not only comfortable and entertaining, but inspiring. I mean, just check out his Instagram. You'll see what I'm talking about. On this episode of Holistically Speaking, Rob shares more about how disconnecting can connect all of us on an even deeper level with Mother Earth and ourselves. How reprioritizing life creates space for self-reflection and regeneration. And how each and every one of us makes a difference, one seed at a time, as we see the need to grow. Plus, a wonderful opportunity to see the film for free and plant your own seeds of life. Enjoy. Rob, thank you so much for being here. Such a pleasure to have you on Holistically Speaking. This has been a long time coming for me. I've been kind of keeping an eye on everything you've been doing and came across the need to grow. I don't know when it was. It had to have been somewhere in 2020. And I have to say, the documentary really opened my eyes to things I didn't know. And it really made me wonder, like, what is it all about? Are we in trouble? And what brought Rob to wanting to do something like this? So thanks for joining the podcast, sharing with listeners your story. It's great to have you here.
So happy to be here, Hilary. Thanks for taking the time to watch the film, caring about these issues. I think they're pretty important and will become increasingly more important as people realize the potential of our ecosystem to actually regenerate and how that aligns with human health regeneration at the same time. So I think it's a really powerful time, even though there's a lot of potential doom and gloom to focus on. We can also focus on the solutions.
Yeah. And for you, I mean, a guy that's actually been in the same field I am as an integrative nutrition health coach, and also, just like caring about the environment isn't just Earth Day or Earth Month. And while it's a great start that we hear about ways that we can protect Mother Earth, there's so much more to that. And I'm curious how you got into that. Like, what's the story behind Rob and how you found your way into this?
Yeah, I was like many people, I think, that become really passionate about health and what is quote unquote deemed alternative health modalities are often people that reach some sort of breaking point in their own health and healing journey where they were experiencing symptoms or some sort of chronic issue that the conventional medical, opportunities were not really giving us the healing that we were desiring. And we knew there was something more. And so we begin to open our mind to other potentials. But for better or for worse, sometimes it takes, reaching a dead end in the conventional wisdom. And so that was for me having to do with a lot of skin issues growing up, and realizing that I was trying the harshest, the best, the most powerful drugs out there, antibiotics, constantly, and my skin would get better for a little bit of time but wasn't healing. And I knew intuitively this is just not how the human body was meant to be. It was not meant to express continuous inflammation and disease. So there must be something else out there. And I think when I began to explore the potential connection of food and nutrition, which now, looking back, just blows my mind how many people still are unable to connect the dots, that what we put into our mouth and digest could have such powerful impact on our skin and other sorts of inflammatory issues in the body. And I was starting to see relief. And I also, at the same time, was learning, or coming to terms with, why were these things not being offered right out, at the front? Why was that not what the dermatologist, the quote unquote expert in skin health, why was that not part of the conversation from the beginning? Not only was it not part of the conversation, but I was actually being told the exact opposite of reality by some of the experts. I was being told that my diet didn't really make that much of a difference. It was all genetics, and that I could, explore these other ideas if I wanted to, and maybe there would be a little bit of relief, but it wouldn't really get to the root of it. And yet these were the people that, of course, were only offering me prescription after prescription. And so as I started to ask those questions, why is it so backwards? And unfortunately, so many people must be going through the same types of loneliness, depression, and self-confidence issues that I was going through as a teenager and in my early years in college. And how can we allow that to happen when other solutions are out there? And it, really opens your eyes into what can only be described as going down the rabbit hole of seeing quite how many opportunities there are and people that are offering alternatives that are not really getting the platform that they deserve, and yet they're getting the results that we deserve to know about. And that connection eventually led me to realizing, that there's the human health side. And some people might think, well, that's selfish. There's also this environmental impact. And as I started to learn about the food system, it was, wow, is this really about me and my health, or is it about the whole planet and wildlife and ecosystems? And ultimately, I've really come around to that these are the exact same conversation, and that the same solutions for human health in terms of avoiding toxicity is the same solution for the environment. We need to prevent the overuse of these toxic chemicals in our environment and actually improve biodiversity, create the conditions for biodiversity to thrive, both on an ecosystem and planetary level, but also inside of our own bodies, inside of our gut. And so the natural resources that we're seeing depleted on a planetary level, I like to think of as, now we need to start thinking of the natural resources that have been depleted in our human body, our human planet, which are oftentimes minerals that were deficient in antioxidants, vitamins, phytonutrients. And we don't think of those as being like the depletion of resources, but really our ecosystems collectively on a human health level are also really suffering for the exact same reasons: overtoxicity and deficiency of these quote unquote resources. So we can rebuild biodiversity because nature wants to do that.
Yeah, and you've made this really powerful artistic project that, God, it really touched me, Rob, because watching how the gentleman that was involved in the movie that built
The green powerhouse, yeah, the pyramid structure. Yep.
not to give it away, because I really do want people to watch this, and we're going to have some information on that in a little bit, but to see that that's one person's goal, that you were just showcasing how many people's goal it actually is, like yourself and the millions of others out there, that I might be one person, but together we can do so much more, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So for you, who suffered from the skin issues, I realized that I have to take care of my gut, my microbiome, my whole body. What am I putting on my body? What am I putting in my body? Where's it coming from? These are powerful questions that we ask ourselves, and we're seeing so much change happening for good, but we're also seeing a lot of resistance, right? So
Indeed.
you becoming a health coach to learn more about how to take care of yourself, not being just a diagnosis, not just being a symptom, and making those powerful changes in your own life. You also turn to your love of comedy and music as your way of sharing the powerful message that you were trying to share to begin with,
Exactly.
correct?
Yeah, exactly. I think for me, it was when I first started to learn about what were unconventional ideas. I was really passionate about trying to share them. And there were a few points of, as you mentioned, resistance that I was feeling, and the dissonance that I was having in conversations with people close to me, whether it be friends or family, was that, it's kind of the ad hominem argument, which is, who are you? You're not a medical doctor. Why should I believe what you're saying when other people are saying something different? And also that, there would be, I think, a personal connection of not wanting to be taught or feel like I didn't know something. And that's a deep psychological element to this, which I think is really the most important piece when we're getting to how are we going to proliferate these solutions that already exist, whether on a human health or planetary level. It ultimately does come down to psychology and communication.
Mm.
And for me, when I realized, wow, I feel like crap trying to share with people something that I thought was empowering and beautiful and important, and it's being met with just really a lot of stress. And so I had to ask myself, is there another way to share these messages that doesn't put me in this position? One, and can I create the opportunity for other people who have the same passion and like-mindedness as I do to have an opportunity to share without having to feel the same distance in the relationships that I was experiencing? And so for me, is comedy a way to sort of break down some of those barriers, to introduce a new idea when people have their guard let down a little bit more? Is music an opportunity for that? Can I make a comedic sketch video that someone can share instead of having to say, hey, mom, I want to teach you about this, or hey, brother, sister, hey, best friend, that can be really awkward for people because they don't want to overstep their bounds and kind of preach.
Mm.
So can we create new packages for information that makes them more accessible? And that was really what led me down all the work that I do. That first was with comedy sketches and music videos and songs, and then eventually to more writing and documentary filmmaking, was really that this is something that can be a tool for people to share, and it just makes it easier. Hey, watch this short, watch this little video, and then they can take from it what they may, and people don't have to experience quite the discomfort that I was experiencing.
I love that we have the ability to do that. Once people realize a true passion or love or a purpose that they have, being able to combine your purpose and your passions and being able to create something bigger from that. I mean, there's more heart in that, right? Like I come from a background of the arts as well. And for me, working in mental health, I'm like, why are we always making mental health so, right? Why can't it be fun? Like, I call it brain candy, right? I want people to enjoy the journey of making themselves like empowering active emotional well-being because it's active, right?
Yes.
So from what you're doing, it's empowering because even now, and I came across your Instagram afterwards, after seeing the video and seeing even that you're still putting out these short musical pieces all about environment and being more aware. And they're catchy, they're witty, they make it fun about learning about something that we need to know about, that need to grow, per se, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that
Yeah.
was really when I first connected with Ryan Wyrick, who is my creative partner. We founded the company Earth Conscious Films that
Mhm.
has turned into our larger platform, Earth Conscious Life. And when we first met to discuss this idea of making a documentary that eventually became The Need to Grow, we really were connecting on this idea of, can we make it less depressing in
Mhm.
relation to so many of the environmental documentaries that were out there. And we had seen, it's doom, it's gloom, we're not going to make it, humanity is screwed and everything's collapsing. And those problems do need to be put into a certain type of context. And I think we had the opportunity and the privilege to be riding on the backs of other documentaries that had laid out a lot of the problems, because there is a place for that. We have to know the stakes. We have to know that there is urgency. And we don't want to be sitting in apathy. But at the same time, there comes a point in human psychology where if we're just bombarded with everything is wrong and well, what's the next step? So if you just show me the polar bear, the starving, skinny polar bear on the ice floe, I don't know what to do to save that polar bear anymore. And if you're not giving me, it's actually counterproductive now, a lot of the messaging that we still see. Because if it's not giving someone the actual action step, then you are doing us a disservice at this point, because people will tune out. And that's what Ryan and I really bonded over in our initial first meeting was, can we make this about solutions? And from a storytelling perspective, that's also not always easy. Doom and fear keeps people in their seats. And that's been very proven psychologically. And we know the news media really taps into that to continue to get you to watch more ads, because you're going to learn about the next crisis to be aware of. And it's embedded in our survival instincts that we do want to know about the threats that exist. So there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But can we actually inspire people and show them that they can do something, that it's not just about waiting for some philanthropist billionaire to come up with some crazy invention to save the world and just hoping and praying. And it's not just about writing to your congressman and petitioning something, but are there other steps? And can we offer a plethora, a menu of options that people can say, well, here's where I'm at, I can do that one. And so for us, we followed 3 different stories in the film that were really different scales of solutions. And I look at that as kind of the biodiversity approach, which is that there isn't going to be one silver bullet. And the solution that's right for you might not be the solution that's right for someone else. Just like, and I think we both understood this concept of bioindividuality, which was that one person's medicine is another person's poison. And the same thing happens when we think of environmental solutions, that you may not be able to grow 90% of your own food in your backyard. Maybe you can't even compost because of your situation, but can you get some of your food scraps to someone who can compost? Can you plant one seed? Can you grow a little bit of food indoors? Can you support an organic local farmer? Can you get a community supported agriculture box, a CSA? What are those steps? And you need to start at the one that is going to be the least likely for you to fail. And so we have this story that includes a high-tech inventor, this mad scientist, Willy Wonka type, brilliant artificial intelligence, one of the longest resumes I've seen when it comes to pop culture. And this is one of the characters that's featured in our story. His name is Michael Smith. And then we have this renegade urban farmer that I look at kind of the middle scale, who's an entrepreneur, and he's trying to grow local regenerative food with some really cutting edge technologies. And then we have this little girl who is one of the main characters of our film, and we follow her from age 6 up until about 10 years old. And what she's able to do with almost no resources at her disposal, just within her community and on a much broader scale, as you'll see in the film, it really takes a lot of the excuses out for most of us watching, because she's transforming her community in a very real way, just because she had the passion and the drive to do it. And if she can do it, we can all do something. And that's what it should be about, is, what are the solutions that you can do? And not about you didn't do the biggest one, but start with the thing that you can do, build success, and naturally you'll want to do the next step after that. And so I think there's been a really great reception to that type of messaging, because we have seen that a lot of people have felt really inspired to either start a garden or something like that.
I absolutely was. And it was the 3 stories. Clearly, I'm not going to build this huge dome on the back of my porch in the apartment that I live in, right? And clearly, I'm not a biochemist, and I don't have the background to do some of the things that were presented by the other person that you shared. But then the little girl, and it touched me, because before I knew it, I was doing a couple plants on my garden. I've always loved I've always had the garden therapy. I've even been more conscious about the invasive plants and using more of the plants that are from our region to plant. But when I first saw that first seed come up of like a bean or
Hmm.
a basil, and knowing that I was part of the process, those little steps can make a really big difference just in your own personal well-being. And then knowing that you're part of something bigger. One seed, like you said, can make a difference in the growth.
They really
And
do.
it was
They really
really,
do.
it's really such a beautiful story. And to listeners, I highly recommend you see The Need to Grow. Rob and his team, they're making it available for free the week of June 21st.
June 22nd through the 28th. Yeah, it'll be totally free around the world.
Got it. So when I first saw it, it was, I believe, on your website. You were
Yeah.
offering it at another time as well. And that hour, 2 hours just sitting there and being able to really be engaged in the program did make a small change in my life. So I know listeners, those of you out there, a part of the community, definitely want to check theneedtogrow.com, because it is a powerful film that to be offering that for free, to touch more people, to give that offering so that maybe it's one more seed planted, is just a powerful message that hopefully we will pass along. So pay it forward. Thanks for doing that.
Amazing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. We were able, the first time that we launched the film, we also did a global free week screening event. We were able to reach about 175 countries around the world. And the beauty there is that it's not limited to any streaming platform. And, a lot of those streaming platforms are massive, and a lot of people will have great access to that. We wanted to just take it one step further. And luckily, we've had the types of allies and partners that have been able to help us spread that message. And it really was kind of an experiment. A lot of people in film distribution, even independent film, thought we were kind of nuts to do it this way. But I had been working on this space for enough time that I hoped, and I believed in my heart that a lot of the allies and friends that we had made over the years that had a pretty big reach were able to step forward. And so if you do get to see the film and you're able to enjoy it, I do hope that you can help us spread the message, because that's really what it's all about. That's the only way that we've been able to do it. We have no traditional marketing or PR team. It's all been word of mouth, and it's been really powerful.
How powerful has it been? I mean, you have this film narrated by Rosario Dawson. I mean, she's huge. Everybody wants to save the planet in some way or another. I mean, where else are we going to go, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, I mean, and you're being seen now in 175 different countries. This film has won awards. I mean, your work and your love and your passion for, well, the only planet we know that we're able to survive on at this time, it matters.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't heard of anything else yet, any other possibilities at this point. So we got to take care of the temple that we're residing on, I imagine, is the
I
best way to put
agree.
it.
Yeah,
You know?
it is funny to look at how much high tech investment is being made towards exploring other planets, which I'm all for. I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan of astronomy, and I love the fact that humans are going out there to check out other planets, and I think that's great. At the same time, when we think about the idea of colonizing Mars, it just makes me laugh, because we have this perfect, already established ecosystem here. And it's a lot easier to make it work here than it would be to start over on Mars, believe me. And nature wants to do it, and that's the cool thing I think about the human body and about Mother Nature as a whole, is that when we get out of her way and out of our own way, these things, they actually are designed to heal. That resilience is embedded deeply in the foundation of just the natural code, the natural order. And so when we allow ecosystems just an opportunity, biodiversity comes back, and it thrives very quickly. And I think it is underestimated how fast that regeneration can happen. And some of the work that we're doing now for another film that we're working on called Pharmacy of Light, Pharmacy with an F, that'll be coming out in a few months. We're diving a little bit deeper into the body's regenerative capabilities, and unfortunately, we're all bombarded with so many negative influences stressors, lack of sleep, lack of proper nutrition. And one of those things that we're really exploring is the lack of connection to nature. And it can seem a little woo-woo at first, but what we're finding in the scientific literature is that there are countless examples of how natural components and elements quite literally affect our physiology. There's nothing woo-woo about it. And whether that has to do with being exposed to negative ions, near a waterfall or somewhere that is a higher nature, whether that's grounding and touching our physical skin to the earth and the electrical changes that happens in our blood cells, even within as little as 45 minutes. I've seen this under a microscope. Or whether it has to do with breathing in what are known as phytoncides that come off of plants, these aromatherapy compounds, or whether that's forest bathing, or as in Japan, Shinrin-yoku, I believe it's pronounced, which we have very real studies on humans as they go into a forest, even as little as 2 days out of a month, dramatically changes the way their immune system works. And no one is doubting those studies. No one is saying that that's junk science. This is very proven stuff, and we can actually transform our bodies. Our inflammation goes down, our blood pressure goes down, and our stress levels go down, and all of these things change. And on a very real level, the immune system functions in a very different way. And so our light exposure, huge, in terms of regulating our circadian rhythm, especially if we're able to get sunlight on our skin. A healthy amount of sunlight early in the morning really triggers our pituitary and pineal gland to regulate our hormones. So we'll sleep better, we'll have better energy throughout the day, we'll feel less stressed, and everything becomes regulated. And so much of this science just isn't talked about. And we kind of belittle, unfortunately, or dismiss these ideas, even though humans, as the EPA has said, we're spending about 93% of our time indoors. I think it's even higher than that. And this is not how we evolved, right? We are animals. We are part of nature. We're not supposed to be in a box breathing in this closed-in air. We're supposed to be engaging with the natural world. And that deficiency, the nature deficiency, I think is a much more profound cause for a lot of our dis-ease than most of medicine is really acknowledging at this point.
I feel like we're seeing a lot more people taking that bold move of the minimalism and getting rid of all their things and taking life on the road in an RV, which I got to be honest, I'm envious to that sometimes. I mean, a couple of years ago, I had a chance to do that on a 2.5 week trip through some of the national parks out west. And it was awe-inspiring, being under the stars, waking up to elk feeding their young with my cup of coffee. I'm just like, what am I witnessing? 24 hours earlier, I'm at Newark Airport, right? But I mean, for some people, that's a first experience, just to expose their families to it, the kids, giving kids a connection to nature, disconnecting from this thing, this little box that our ear is constantly against, and texting and typing. By the way, I just saw what you sent out. You sent out one of your emails that touched on that. And I couldn't agree more about how we need to, how we get that fear of missing out, and we're connected to the source of the internet and everything, which is great. It has its value, but I love sometimes when Wi-Fi doesn't work or when I'm disconnected. Like I was just away for the weekend and did not even use my phone, and it was like bliss, or before we even had internet, I went outward bound for 2 weeks through the Colorado Rockies in college. And I think it's so hard sometimes for people to let go of what they're so attached to. But once you do, you're like in the element, and you don't miss it.
Yeah.
We saw that recently, didn't we, Rob? I mean, think about it just this last year with what you were talking about with the pandemic being the perfect example of this world returning to a state of nature in so many respects. You hear the birds, you see the deer, animals you might have not seen in plenitude that we're starting to see now because we gave them space, right?
Gave them just a little bit of a chance. And it was really beautiful to see beaches that would transform,
Mm.
and species of turtles may return, or
Mm.
just areas that dolphins or whales might have avoided because of the
Mm.
chaos of boats and the sound pollution that's underwater. And yeah, even in Los Angeles, just from witnessing cars be so minimized in those early few weeks when everybody really was hunkered down. I was still
Mhm.
out there on the trails doing my trail runs, and I really, I wondered if it was a little bit in my head, but I really did see a different number of animals just exploring areas that they
Mm.
weren't normally. And these are trails that I'm on constantly, so I have a pretty good idea of it. But I think the same thing is true with our humanity. I mean, the metaphor there is, like you say, when we're able to unplug a little bit, we have to be at least aware of the addictions that exist, and not in denial the fact that these things are built to be addictive, and that they really do trigger certain responses in the brain to keep us uh, hypnotized in a certain way. And
Mm.
so when we have that opportunity, and sometimes it can take forcing ourselves, and we may be lying to ourselves, no, I don't need to do that, I don't need to cut off. And actually, I have a friend that lives in the Boston area that used to, years ago, he would take CEOs and leaders of companies out into sort of nature and survival retreats. And some
Mm.
of these businessmen had a really hard time. The rule was very clear that there are no cell phones allowed. And I forget how many days, that the program was. And he was teaching people to reconnect, and it's very spiritual, but it's also, very real life skills on how to survive in the wild. And he would tell us stories of some of the people that were so resistant and thought that they were so powerful, so important, oh, well, there will be an exception for me, I need to have this. And it was like, well, you have a choice. You can leave and not do the program, or you will cut off from technology for these few days. And by the end of those few days, the transformation that happened in people was so profound, startling. And many times people had a really hard time going back to the real world, and we're actually faced with a lot of self-reflection and reprioritization of, can I
Mm.
go back to this life? Because I just experienced something that was so deeply human. And they come to the realization that a lot of the schedule and the busyness and the stress and the chaos and the routines are not necessarily human. They're this version of human society, but it may not be actually
Mm.
how we evolved to feel good. And I've been looking into neuroscience for a long time, and some really cool breakthroughs are happening in our understanding of the human mind. For a long time, we thought that
Mm.
feelings were getting in the way of rational thinking, right? And that, okay, you're being too emotional, it's clouding our judgment. And what we're actually discovering now is that the brain evolved where the feeling parts of the brain are actually at a much more foundational level, and that
Mm.
our instincts and our feedback of how we feel is actually probably more potently accurate in many circumstances, in terms of determining, is this working for me? Is this, and it's hard to sometimes figure out what is it about the situation or the circumstance. But really, when we're not feeling good, this is feedback. This is your body,
Mm.
your soul, your spirit, your mind telling you something needs to change here, right? So when we're not feeling great, we
Right.
can go into a negative spiral of, oh no, this is wrong, this is wrong. But if we allow ourselves to say, well, wait a minute, okay, that's triggering like a warning. I don't feel good. Okay, great. Well, then that
Mm.
means I need to do something different. And this idea of biophilia, or wanting to be deeply connected to nature and or community, it's really part of all of us at our core. And when we're disconnected from those things, it can be really easy to fall into continuous stress. And we may not realize that
Mm.
some of those most basic reconnections to the natural world and to community can actually just really dissipate a lot of the anxiety that we may have had. And that sense of feeling, that sense of belonging, that sense of being loved and being seen wipes away a lot of the other stuff that our thinking brain might be clouding and saying, well, no, if I had this right, if I had that thing, if I had this piece of success, if I won that, if I got that job, or a lot of that stuff is the mind creating illusions for something deeper that we're longing for, to actually ease this feeling, I think, of loneliness and disconnect that too many of us are feeling.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that about the neuroscience of things, because when the work I do, which is a neuroscience based approach, which is all about altering your thoughts, moods, and behavior. And we have the ability, and I call it like the Doppler radar. The minute, if you don't walk outside with an umbrella and it's 99% raining and you make that choice, you're fighting against the instinct of what you know or what has been told to you, and your gut in a way, right? Like our microbiome or our intuition are two guts that we have, right? Our two brains. And, even in this pandemic, there was a statistic that came out recently that over 70% of people who are working full time in the office do not want to go back full time, because they're realizing there's value in being around my family, community, home.
Yeah.
Why would I want to go back and sit in a cubicle all day for 16 hours when I'm getting 2 hours with my child or my wife or my husband or myself, right?
Yeah.
And maybe this pandemic is been a way of the universe, or whoever you believe in, whoever you're, whatever you think is a higher power, is like, dude, wake up, wake up, open up. Like,
Yeah.
the world is thriving. What do we need to do? What do we need to do for ourselves? And there's a lot of messages there, and I hope people are grabbing on to the ones that they're receiving, because these are those little Doppler radar moments, right?
Yes, it can be
Really
an
powerful
opportunity.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's
can
an
be, and
opportunity if
it
we
hasn't
allow
been.
it.
It hasn't been for everyone, right? And
Right.
and like you say, it can be, one door closing. Can we find the next door that just opened up? And that isn't
Yeah.
always easy for everyone. And that there's
No,
still a lot of fear and a lot of disconnect, unfortunately, that has come out of particularly this last year or so. But I think
definitely.
if we allow ourselves the opportunity to, this is why, focusing on gratitude, and as much as that seems cliche, it is, as a way to reprogram the brain to be looking for the good,
Mhm.
and actually reiterating those neuropathway connections that make us feel good. Because you can at any time focus on the bad, it's always there as an option, but is that really how we want to feel? So can we use, the science that is already understood about patterns, and being able to reprogram our subconscious mind, and use our intuition? I think there's so much potential there, and people desperately want to feel better. And so if we can allow the opportunities, the leaders, the information, the education, a chance just to reach these people that are desperate for solutions, I think we are at a really powerful turning point, transition time. And it won't be that everyone,
Yeah.
arrives at the same conclusions, but those of us who are ready for that and really want that, the opportunity is going to be there.
So for yourself, you mentioned gratitude, you mentioned taking your runs, you mentioned living obviously a holistic life, which I imagine you do on a grand scale. What else does Rob like to do to be in alignment with just connecting with nature and living your truth, really?
Yeah. Well, I have spent a lot of time through depression, which was what led me
Mm.
there. The same way with the human body, that reaching kind of a dead end and having to discover the power of nutrition, the same way reaching some sort of psychological blocks, and not feeling worthy in many ways, allowed
Mm.
me the opportunity to really dive deep into, is there an alternative here? There must be a better way to do this. And I think I was so desperate for solutions that, in that darkness, I was open to trying things that were so new. And that's one of the great lessons, was being open-minded and giving things a chance to see if you like them, if they resonate, if they work or not. And for me, it was really learning about the way that the brain works and through neuroscience that I arrived at the accessibility of some of these ideas that may have just seemed like, okay, that's a nice concept. But when you actually learn how the brain works, you realize that some of these things are not just a nice idea, they literally rewire your brain. And so can you, and are you going to be willing to commit? Because just like anything, it's practice. And so if you do it over and over and over, it's allowing those neural pathways to strengthen. And so practicing ways that make you feel good, that's going to be slightly different for everyone, but meditation was just a massive transformation for me. And I felt that guided meditations and specifically some audio technologies were a really great way in for me and allowed me the opportunity to really relax and dissipate a lot of the anxiety or the depression that was there. And it was in doing those things, and something like a mantra that people may think is, okay, yeah, you're telling yourself something, but you might not believe it. But the whole point is that at first you may not believe it, but eventually the brain actually starts to look for the truth in that, right? So if it's, I am beautiful, or I am worthy, or I am lovable, whatever those things may be, at first you may say, well, the resistance is there. I don't believe it. I'm lying to myself. But it's okay at first if you start to feel that, just like when you start to meditate at first, I'm not relaxed, this is pointless, right? My mind is still racing. Well, yeah, it's going to, the mind is still going to work. But the idea is we're creating the opportunity through meditation for our brain waves to slow down eventually. And so we start to see those benefits in our gray matter and our areas of compassion in the brain start to go up. And then we start to believe and integrate some of these thoughts if we say them or write them. I found is really powerful. Handwriting ideas. So journaling is something that I still do, not just as a way to release, the clutter of my mind, but actually as a practice for integrating beliefs. And so whatever is the thing that I'm trying to work on at that time is focusing on the feeling of gratitude for already believing it, believing that it's already there, and writing that. And we know that in our hands, there are so many muscles that actually through muscle memory is infinitely more powerful than typing something. So I could type a mantra is to one level, but actually when you handwrite something on a physical book, on paper, it's integrating into your brain in a very different way. So we're actually able to speed up that process. So I started to become really curious about, well, what are the ways, and maybe some people will call it biohacking. I don't know if it's quite that, but it's, how do we hack the brain to be able to integrate new thoughts as fast as possible? And it can take, real practice, almost obsession at first, if you're really deeply desiring it. And so you have to ask yourself, how badly do I want it? Do I want it badly enough that I'm able to meditate on it, to write a mantra, write it a bunch of times in a book every day, every morning, every night? How badly do I want to tell myself this belief? And if you want it badly enough, you will change. I mean, it's not a maybe. It's just the proof of how the brain works. And so I found that researching and reading those books to understand that it's not just about, let me trust it. It's that if I see that this is already proven, it is neuroscience, then let me just use those proven tools. And if I do it, guess what? It actually works.
It's like it's neuro-linguistic programming. It's NLP. I mean, it's the outcome. It's seeing it as though it's already existing and it's there. I love using NLP within my havening practice because it's it's not a want, it's not a desire in a way. It's the want of what you already know is there, but you have to believe it. It almost goes back, Rob, to like, remember when we were kids, we used to have to, when we got in trouble, we had to write something on the board like a gajillion times.
Yeah.
But after a while, it sinks in, and it's not just because you're repetitively writing it. It's because you're like, oh, I will never do this again. Yeah, I will never do this again. I'll never do. I'm not going to do that anymore because that's a negative response I'm getting from that, or rather go to the positive place, like I am positive, right?
Yeah.
But the NLP is powerful as long as you can see your outcome, for sure.
Yeah, it's it's positive brainwashing in a sense.
Yeah.
I mean that word is pretty loaded, but the idea is you can actually you can use those tools to your advantage, right? And we're going to be bombarded with the opposite everywhere constantly. And so the commercialism, marketing, and news media, advertising, they really tap into that power already. So the deck is stacked very much against us, where we're going to be bombarded with, you need this to feel a certain way, or you're not good enough like this, or you don't have, this type of life, and we're going to be hit with that. And so we actually are at a point where we kind of have to build our own internal resilience, to build the defenses of truly being grateful for everything, because otherwise we will be hijacked. We are just waiting to be, exploited by these industries. I mean, and they're attacking us from so many angles that we're not necessarily all going to go and cut off from the internet and go live in the woods and off the land and never interact with society again, right? So assuming that we want to participate in society, we have to be aware that that stuff is actually being used against us. And so I think we're almost burdened automatically with, you have to practice a shield, building your own shield and building your own self-love. And what people may call self-care is not a selfish thing. Or if you want to call it selfish, fine. It's a priority that has to happen. We need to do that in order to show up for our productivity and for other relationships. And that was really critical for me, was coming to terms with, is this escapism when I go out and on these long runs and out into nature? Is it just that I'm trying to get away from my work and get away from the stress? On one level, yeah, it is escaping that, but that's because you're allowing yourself the opportunity to have mental wellness again. So that when you come back to those duties, those responsibilities, those relationships, you can actually function, and you're not at that point of your stress threshold. And so for me, it was realizing, wow, I need to prioritize those things. There is nothing selfish about it. It's strategic, and it allows me to be more productive and more resilient in everything else that I do. So I'm going to show up better, as opposed to just trying to run on empty and just blast out productivity without taking that quote unquote self-care.
And we do that all too often. I mean, I have to check myself every once in a while, like get up out of this chair and step away from the computer and realize, okay, go take a walk. Just walk around your yard every once in a while, just to disconnect for a second. And we really, sometimes when we're so like tunnel vision on a project, and even if the project's for good, how good are we if we are not giving ourselves a chance to disconnect? Because our brain hijacks ourselves, right? I mean, the amygdala loves to go to that fight or flight mode, right? So yeah, being selfish means that you can be selfless going forward if you're taking care of yourself first. And just a reminder to folks, Rob Herring here, he is the guy behind The Need to Grow, this amazing award-winning film that's going to be offered again for free on the website, needtogrow.com, theneedtogrow.com. And we're going to share more about that in the podcast notes. And listen, if this is resonating with any of you out there, my Holistically Speaking listeners, definitely, subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review, pass it along to one person that this can make a difference to, because it really is that one seed, right, Rob? And, make a difference, because each and every one of us have some part in all of this. And I would imagine after people see the movie, see the film, see everything you're working on, from, you have the GMO OMG, you've got this other project coming up.
Yeah, Pharmacy of Light is a new film that will be coming out in 2021. And we actually are working on I don't know if I've shared this with you, but we are working on another film about the gut-brain axis and mental health, and how we can rebuild our mental wellness through strategies that already exist. So yeah, we're trying to focus on inspiring people with solutions, and it's a cool time because people are ready for it and they want it and they're eager to share it. And so, like you say, it is about planting the seed and understanding that the ripple impact that we have doesn't necessarily need to be on our radar. You may not get some of the feedback of the positive impacts that it makes when you share, a positive story, or you share something like this podcast. It may ripple out beyond our conscious awareness, and that's okay. We don't necessarily have to know all the good that it did, but if we share, I think, with intention, it can only do good, right? There's not going to be a negative there. So it's a powerful opportunity.
It's like the story of the starfish. We've heard the starfish story where the guy's walking on the beach and throws the starfish back. He's throwing them back into the ocean, and someone comes along and is like, and I'm totally tearing the story apart. I'm sure it has a much deeper Zen-like feel to it, but somebody comes along and is like, why are you doing that? You're not making a difference. And he throws it back. He's like, I made a difference to that one.
Exactly.
And that one makes a difference to the ecosystem. And so if we can make a difference to one starfish, we're either the one throwing it back and we're part of what is changing the ecosystem, or we've just, we've been a part of the process where that starfish is like, thanks.
Yes.
I love that. So before we go, because you got this comedy background, I'm not letting you go without doing my rapid fire. Don't think you're going anywhere.
Oh boy. I don't know what I'm in for. Let's do it.
This is good, but I have to wear my old lady glasses to do this because I'm writing down scribble and I have no idea what I wrote. So basically, I'm just going to mention one word. And what I'd love for you to do is just come back with the first word that comes to mind. Don't give much thought to it. Just words that we've been talking about that I wrote down within our conversation. And let's see what's on Rob's head the minute I say one of these words. Oh boy. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. Nature.
Human.
Soil.
Regeneration.
Yes. Meditation.
Peace.
Biodiversity.
Interconnection.
Comedy.
Laughter. I mean, that's so stupid and obvious.
No,
that was the word. That was the word.
Don't think about it. Depression.
Healing.
Gratitude.
Daily.
Resilience.
Innate.
Earth.
Nurture.
That's good. Like that. That was a good pace. So in closing, let me just say thank you for being here. And when this other film comes out, we're going to have you back on because you're doing really powerful stuff here. And I appreciate you being who you are and sharing your voice and using your talents to do so and continuing to grow yourself, right?
Yeah.
In every step that you're doing. So I'd love if you will just leave listeners with a final thought that Rob would want to leave with listeners of the podcast.
The more that we can reconnect consciously with the elements and with nature, the greater opportunity we will have for a regenerative, healing future. And I think if we look for how are we interacting with water in a clean, conscious way, where is our air coming from, and is that clean? The earth element is the soil, the minerals, and the foods that we're consuming. Are we able to participate in something that heals that and also provides those earth minerals into our body? And lastly, the one is the fire that becomes overlooked. And that's what our new film, Pharmacy of Light, is getting into. And yeah, we could do a whole hour on that topic and really how photonics or biophotonics, how photons, light packages, really affect the human body. And so how are we interacting with that fire element through the sun and through outdoor time and healthy sun exposure and light overall? And we're all beings of light. And so a lot of these ideas are really validated through science. Yes. There's light literally flowing through our bodies. It's measurable. And I think if we look back to those elements, and maybe we do call the fifth element being love, if we're able to reconnect with those elements as often as possible, I think we do have a really powerful foundation for healing.
Oh boy, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so glad you said that about the light because that went right through my head. I was thinking we are beings of light, we need to shine. We don't want to dim our lantern. We need light. And if we see that we are all sharing some bit of sunlight out there, then we're creating the possibility for growth. So thank you for sharing that. That was really beautiful.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk about this.
Absolutely. So again, listeners, holistically speaking, Earthconsciouslife.org is the website that Rob is part of his other project, a co-founder of that platform, and also The Need to Grow, which will be available for free via their website, theneedtogrow.com, June 22nd through the 28th.
That's right.
We're going to put the link on there so that you can watch this powerful documentary. Please do. It was life-changing for me. It made me want to reach out and kind of hang with you, Rob, like every chance I could get just to have a conversation with you. And honestly, check out Rob on his Instagram as well, because I love watching your videos. I mean, you're still using pieces of who you are artistically to share the message. I'll have all that to share with listeners of the podcast. And from that, that's where we grow. So thanks so much, Rob. Really appreciate it.
Such a pleasure.
Don't miss a chance to see The Need to Grow absolutely for free June 22nd to the 28th. And if you missed the link during our conversation, you'll find it on the podcast page, along with all the information about Rob and Earth Conscious Life. And if you're enjoying this episode and think it provides value, share it with just one other person. Pay it forward, and let's build a better world. And remember, mental health matters. So if you're looking for inspiring ways to be kind to your mind, reach out to me on my website at hilaryrusso.com and book a complimentary discovery call. I'd love to share more with you about havening and how you can put the power of active well-being in your own hands. You can also reach out to me on social media, LinkedIn and Clubhouse at Hilary Russo. Holistically Speaking is produced by Alan Seals with music by Lipbone Redding and recorded on Squadcast. Thanks for listening and making Holistically Speaking the #1 interview podcast that you should tune into. Your stories and support are what put us there. So on that note, plant the seeds, be kind to your mind, and don't forget to laugh.